It was the judge and the imbecile. They were both of them naked, and they neared through the desert dawn like beings of a mode little more than tangential to the world at large, their figures now quick with clarity and now fugitive in the strangeness of that same light, like things whose very portent renders them ambiguous, like things so charged with meaning that their forms are dimmed. The three at the well watched mutely this transit out of the breaking day, and even though there was no longer any question as to what it was that approached, yet none of them would name it. They lumbered on, the judge a pale pink beneath his talc of dust, like something newly born. The imbecile much the darker, lurching together across the pan at the very extremes of exile, like some scurrilous king stripped of his vestiture and driven together with his fool in the wilderness to die. Those who travel in desert places do indeed meet with creatures surpassing all description. The watchers at the well rose the better to witness these arrivals. The imbecile was fairly loping along to keep the pace. The judge on his head wore a wig of dried river mud, from which protruded bits of straw and grass, and tied upon the imbecile's head was a rag of fur with the blackened blood side out. The judge carried in one hand a small canvas satchel, and he was bedraped with meat like some medieval penitent. He hove up at the diggings and nodded them a good morning, and he and the idiot slid down the bank and knelt and began to drink. Even the idiot, who must be fed by hand. He knelt beside the judge and sucked noisily at the mineral water and raised his dark larval eyes to the three men crouched above him at the rim of the pit, and then bent and drank again. The judge threw off his bandoliers of sun-blacked meat, and his skin beneath was strangely mottled pink and white in the shapes of them. Why does, by the way, as an aside, why does Cormac make sure to tell us that the judge has a sunburn? The judge has been sunburned, like in the shapes of these strips of meat.
Because like the first thing we like saw him, he was like baby white skin, very pale, and now like it's almost as if like he's touched by something.
Yeah, and what's the significance of the fact that the judge is touched by something like sunburn?
Because he's like never been affected by anything.
He's never been affected by anything.
It's like a weakness.
Yeah, so McCarthy says this thing in an interview with John Sepich. He says, it's so attenuated. He says there is reason to believe that the judge is not entirely of this world. Right? It doesn't come out and call the judge supernatural, right? There is reason to believe that the judge is not entirely of this world. So the judge gives these kind of supernatural vibes, but yet he gets a sunburn, right? You guys have seen Predator, right?
Which one?
The original.
The
Yeah.
original one? Okay.
Right?
That's the best one.
If it bleeds, we can kill it, right? So I can remember when I first realized, the judge is sunburned. I was like, if it's sunburned, it can die.
Take hits, yeah.
Because the big question, the major dramatic question of this scene, what happens if the kid cocks his Colt and
Shoots the judge.
puts a .44 caliber ball in the judge?
Those are chances, too.
No. He sat by the little mud cap and laved water over his burnt and peeling skull and over his face, and he drank again and sat in the sand. He looked at his old companions, like they were all together the day before, And already the order of Glanton's gang is a thing of the past, right?
Scattered.
Yeah.
Scattered
And
about.
not only that, it's almost like from a forgotten time. His old companions, dude, I knew you yesterday. His mouth was cracked and his tongue swollen. Lewis, he said, what will you take for the hat? Toadvine spat. It ain't for sale, he said. Everything's for sale, said the judge. What will you take? Toadvine looked uneasily at the ex-priest. He looked down into the well. Got to have my hat, he said. How much? Toadvine gestured with his chin at the strings of meat. I reckon you want to trade for some of that tug for it. Not at all, said the judge. Such as is here is for everyone. How much for the hat? What do you give? Said Toadvine. The judge studied him. I'll give $100, he said. No one spoke. The idiot crouched on its haunches seemed also to be awaiting the outcome of this exchange. Toadvine took off the hat and looked at it. His lank black hair clove to the sides of his head. It won't fit you, he said. The judge quoted him some term in Latin. He smiled. Not your concern, he said. Toadvine put on the hat and adjusted it. I reckon that's what you got in that there satchel, he said. You reckon correctly, said the judge. Toadvine looked off toward the sun. I'll make it 125 and won't ask you where you got it. Let's see your color. The judge unclasped the satchel and tipped and emptied it out onto the sand. It contained a knife and perhaps half a bucket full of gold coins of every value. The judge pushed the knife to one side and spread the coins with the palm of his hand and looked up. Toadvine took off the hat. He made his way down the slope. He and the judge squatted on either side of the judge's trove, and the judge put forward the coins agreed upon, advancing them with the back of his hand forward like a croupier. Toadvine handed up the hat and gathered the coins, and the judge took the knife and slit the band of the hat at the rear and cut through the brim and opened the crown, and then set the hat on his head and looked at Tobin and the kid. Come down, he said. Come down and share this meat. By the way, when the judge says, come down and share this meat, I don't want to. I don't want to share the meat. I just don't want it. You go share the meat. I don't want to share the meat. Why is there such an ominous, charged, electric, like Hitchcockian sense about this whole passage? You guys know what I mean? Like the tension that just starts to like crank up. Elizabeth?
It's almost like because the gang isn't around anymore, the kid and the ex-priest, who I don't think ever really liked the judge, are now kind of like, I have no reason to wander the desert with you anymore.
Yeah. What are the rules? In this new order, what new paradigm, what new protocols have asserted themselves? Yes, ma'am.
Similar to that, it just feels like it's the turning point, and the judge knows it's the turning point, especially with the kid, because the kid started off thinking one way, but by this point, he's had so many bad reasons that the judge sees he's not going to follow him as simply as he has before.
Yeah. There are other hands about this. Yes, sir.
It's like we know that the judge could kill them all, like no effort, and he's choosing not to. He's choosing to spend all this gold and be generous and start. Like, what is he up to?
Yeah. That's what the kid and Tobin and Toadvine have to be thinking. Like, what is this dude playing? Like, what's the play here? Also, so the kid, I'm trying to imagine the scene, right? The kid seems to be like 10 yards or so away from the judge. Now, at 10 yards, a loaded pistol in your hand, in your hand is more lethal than a knife. At 0 to 6 feet, which is more lethal, a pistol or a knife? A knife. You should be more frightened of a knife. Actually, at 0 to 21 feet, you should be more frightened of a knife. 21 feet is the distance at which a cop will shoot you if you have a blade in your hand, if you have any kind of bladed instrument. Because someone with a bladed instrument in his hand can close the distance at 21 feet and cut you open before you can draw and put shots on target. Sir?
He's kind of also showing dominance. So, well, couple things. He's kind of trying to recruit everyone to be under him, and we get to that a little later. He's asking for the gun and everything, and they say, Tobin says, we, he questions that. But for one, he's showing, he doesn't really care about money. So, like, if you stay with me, you're going to get rich. It's shown with $100, like $100 gold, whatever.
Gosh.
And then he also shows, I don't know, I think it's kind of like, I'm a badass. You know, I'm going
Right.
to take your small hat, I'm going to gut it so that it fits me.
Come down and
If you
share
cross
this.
me, well, who else is going to get gutted so that, you know. if it
Come
fits
down and
my
share this
purpose.
meat. Yeah. They didn't move. Toadvine was already had a piece of it in both hands and was tugging at it with his teeth. It was cool in the well, and the morning sun fell only upon the upper rim. The judge scooped the remaining coins back into the satchel and stood it aside and bent to drink again. The imbecile had been watching its reflection in the pool, and it watched the judge drink, and it watched the water calm itself once more. The judge wiped his mouth and looked at the figures above him. "How are you fixed for weapons?" he said. The kid had set one foot over the edge of the pit, and now he drew it back. Tobin did not move. He was watching the judge. "We've just the one pistol, Holden." "We," said the judge. "The lad here." The kid had risen to his feet again. The ex-priest stood by him. The judge and the floor of the well likewise rose, and he adjusted his hat and gripped the valise under his arm like some immense and naked barrister whom the country had crazed. Who was it that said that because the judge has gone cray? Who was it that said that? Yeah. Oh, does it you? Yeah. I mean, yeah, right? There's a sense that maybe Glanton is like a governor on the judge's engine. Like he keeps the judge from spinning out of control, but now Glanton's dead. What's this dude gonna do? Which is an interesting idea. Glanton's 5'8", he's a smaller guy. The judge is enormous, gargantuan. "Weigh your counsel, priest. We are all here together. Yonder sun is like the eye of God, and we will cook impartially upon this great, salacious griddle, I do assure you." By the way, that's how I always, if I'm out like at the lake with friends, that's how I always ask for sunscreen. Is that bad? They're like, "Gwen, you're really fair. Are you going to do you need sunscreen?" "Yonder sun is like the eye of God, and we will cook impartially upon this great, salacious..." "I'm no priest, and I've no counsel," said Tobin. "The lad is a free agent." And then that sentence that we've read over and over and over again. The judge smiled. "Quite so," he said. He looked at Toadvine, and he smiled up at the ex-priest again. "What then? Are we to drink at these holes turnabout like rival bands of apes?" The ex-priest looked at the kid. They stood facing the sun. He squatted the better to address the judge below. "Do you think there is a registry where you can file on the wells of the desert?" "Ah, priest, you'd know those offices more readily than I. I've no claim here. I've told you before. I'm a simple man. You know you're welcome to come down here and to drink and to fill your flask." Tobin didn't move. "Let me have the canteen," said the kid. He'd taken the pistol from his belt, and he handed it to the ex-priest and took the leather bottle and descended the bank. The judge followed him with his eyes. The kid circled the floor of the well, no part of which was altogether beyond the judge's reach, and he knelt opposite the imbecile and pulled the stopper from the flask and submerged the flask in the basin. He and the imbecile watched the water run in at the neck of the flask, and they watched it bubble, and they watched it cease. The kid stoppered the flask and leaned and drank from the pool, and then he sat back and looked at Toadvine. Are you going with us? Toadvine looked at the judge. I don't know. I'm subject to arrest. They'll arrest me in California. Arrest you? Toadvine didn't answer. He was sitting in the sand, and he made a tripod of 3 fingers and stuck them in the sand before him, and then he lifted and turned them and poked them in again so that there were 6 holes in the form of a star or a hexagon, and then he rubbed them out again. He looked up, a Masonic symbol, right? It's basically like the Star of David. You wouldn't think that a man would run plumb out of country out here, would you? The kid rose and slung the flask by its strap over his shoulder. His trouser leg was black with blood, and the bloody stump of the shaft jutted from his thigh like a peg for hanging implements upon. He spat and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and he looked at Toadvine. It ain't country you've run out of, he said. Then he made his way across the sink and up the bank. The judge followed him with his eyes, and when the kid reached the sunlight at the top, he turned and looked back, and the judge was holding open the satchel between his naked thighs. $500, powder and ball included. The ex-priest was at the kid's side. Do him, he hissed. How the priest comes to advocate murder. Why this moment? Like this is like when Tobin says do him, kill him. This is as if like there's you have a branch and you're bending it and you're bending it and you're bending it and everyone's kind of like that's about to snap, and then do him is like crack. Why this moment? Why this moment? The judge has made an exorbitant offer for a pistol. Why does the priest want him murdered?
Because he doesn't want the judge to get a weapon.
Okay, so the larger thing is, right, obviously, you don't want the judge armed. He's bad enough with just a knife. Yes, ma'am?
It just seems like this is the one moment in the whole story where the judge doesn't have the upper hand versus everyone else. And then even in the moments later when
Yes.
this is your only time that you can kill him, he still has an upper hand. He's still armed. Right now he's naked and he has nothing.
Great.
Money.
Perfect. Exactly so, right? The judge, for the first time in the story, doesn't have the upper hand, doesn't have a weapon. His maybe opponents do, and the kid can just, it's this quick. All right, just a cock and a slow, steady press to the rear. Let me ask this question. What would you do if you were the kid in this circumstance?
I'm shooting the judge.
Yeah. I believe I would too. I believe I would go extend touch, cock press, cock press, cock press, cock press, cock press, cock press. Bang, 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 bang. Right? I'm going to unload the pistol into the judge, center mass. And then I'm going to get my knife out and I'm going to cut his throat. Okay, why doesn't the kid do that? Why doesn't the kid do that?
He kind of thinks, I forget how he says it. He sees at that moment, the judge as any other man. And, they're also kind of in the desert, so. And on top of that, he's more, what's the word? I guess humane than the rest of the characters. He's the
Mercy.
only character, he's the only character in the entire book that shows mercy, at any point in time. I mean, he saved already, 3 people he sticks
Right.
with his crew, even when they kind of ditch him too. So at this point in time, he's also showing the judge mercy.
Right.
Because he just thinks, oh, well, he doesn't have a weapon. He has no horses yet.
Doesn't have a horse, doesn't appear to have a gun, has a small knife. Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
I was gonna say it was mercy. I mean, the kid throughout the entire book has consistently shown mercy.
mm-hmm. Yeah, mercy again. Yes, ma'am.
I think it just reminds me of the fortune telling and the Four of Cups, that he's a very passive character, and this is a moment that he has it's a moment where he has an action. He has to do an action, but in his character he's very passive and he lets things happen.
Right.
So it's a turning point for the judge where he has doesn't have the upper hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a turning point for the kid because he's letting stuff happen.
For once, the kid has a choice.
Mm-hmm.
The kid can end this, perhaps. At least he can empty his gun into him. Now, there's this larger kind of conversation about would this kill the judge? I don't think Cormac does anything by accident in this book, and I don't think someone as careful and smart and obsessive as Cormac points out the judge's sunburn. And twice, right? As something, this is different, we can state all the things you guys have said, right? The insinuation is that this is the kid's shot. There was a hand, there's someone else. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna say that I've noticed a pattern when McCarthy writes these protagonists that have this chance to kill the bad guy or the person who's after them, and they don't do it.
Yeah, because we were reading No Country for Old Men before this, right? Llewellyn Moss has the drop on Shagur in the hotel room. And he doesn't do it. He doesn't do it. He could have ended things. Yes, ma'am.
I don't necessarily have anything to tie this to,
Yeah.
but I think it's interesting in this moment where the judge is noticeably sunburned and needing help from another, that it doesn't feel planned, how the story about how they found him in a random rock, how that felt like it was his plan all along. This just feels
Right.
just really, I don't know.
The judge doesn't feel like the judge is in control. For once, he's not writing in the ledger. He's not writing the book of this story. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if this was on purpose, but it just reminded me of when we first met the judge, and he had more power against, was it a priest in the beginning? Or
Mhm.
a kid?
Yeah.
And the opposite, where someone in religion has more power and is trying to persuade him to kill, while it's the judge who has less power.
That is very interesting. That's very interesting. So yeah, when we first meet Judge, it's in Nacogdoches in the Reverend Green's revival tent. The judge walks in. He immediately seizes the initiative. Stealth speed, violence of action. He comes in, he projects himself, and then remember, he gets away with the Reverend Green's offering, the double handful of coins, right? And now here we are. He's got all this money in his satchel from robbing people, but he's not armed, and he doesn't have, right? He's playing from a defensive posture. He's even below them in elevation. Now, this sounds kind of odd, but in a gunfight, a few inches of elevation is an enormous advantage. It's an enormous advantage. A few inches. In battles, Civil War battles, right? You'll read the history of Malvern Hill. You'll read the history of the 7 Days campaign, Antietam, Fredericksburg, any of this, especially Fredericksburg. Any force that is assaulting up an incline, and not necessarily a steep incline, a slight incline, they're at an enormous disadvantage. You take what's called plunging fire. Now, in this instance, you got one guy with one pistol, but still, gravity is a killer. Gravity is a killer, right? So this is yet more advantage that the judge has. Was there another hand? Was there someone else? I wanted everyone to talk that wanted to. All right, so let's go forward a few lines here. The kid took the pistol, but the ex-priest clung to his arm, whispering. And when the kid pulled away, he spoke aloud, such was his fear. You'll get no second chance, lad. Do it. He is naked. He is unarmed. God's blood, do you think you'll best him any other way? Do it, lad. Do it for the love of God. Do it or I swear your life is forfeit. The judge smiled. He tapped his temple. The priest has been too long in the sun. $7.50, and that's my best offer. It's a seller's market. The kid put the pistol in his belt. Then, with the ex-priest at his elbow, importunate, he circled the crater and they set out west across the pan. Toadvine climbed up and watched them. After a while, there was nothing to see. So Tobin knows, like, you'll not get another chance. You'll not get a second chance. This is it. There's only one. You pass it up, you're going to be looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Okay, so we talked about the tactical thing to do here. Tactical thing is you empty your pistol into the judge, right? Also, I mean, I'm not thinking morally now. I'm just thinking tactically, strategically. The judge isn't backed up by, the idiot's with him, right? So there's no sense that if you kill the judge, Glanton isn't sitting over there to draw on you. There's not a sense that it seems like there's going to be finality to this if they were to shoot the judge, if the kid were to shoot the judge, right? So the kid doesn't do the tactical thing. He doesn't do the strategic thing. He does the merciful thing. Let me ask this in a larger sense and in a moral sense. Does the kid do the right thing here? The kid did what the judge thought he would. Can you say more about that? I like that a lot.
Because I feel like the judge already knows the kid's character, so he knows that the kid wasn't going to shoot him. Could he have guessed maybe the kid wouldn't have given him the gun for the amount of money? Maybe. But I don't think he ever thought the kid was going to shoot him. So every time that the kid has shown mercy, it has been in a place where they have had the upper hand, and now that the kid is the one with the upper hand, he's going to show mercy to the judge who does not.
Oh, that's really good. Did you have, yes ma'am?
I have
A little bit of a,
response to that.
okay, yeah.
Because I feel like the judge would know that the kid isn't gonna buy the gun or give the gun in exchange for money. And I think that's what is frustrating to the judge later when, they have the hunt thing. Because all this time the judge was able to talk himself into things and convince people and use his knowledge to confuse people and stuff like that. And the kid has stayed unaffected by that the entire time. Even here is it's the best you're gonna get in the seller's market, which would be confusing for him because he's 6 or 14, somewhere in his young kid teens at this point. So I don't know. I think that's what makes him so angry. And this feels to me like this last chance that the judge is reaching out to the kid. It's you could join me and you don't have to always define me. Let me control you.
Wow. I agree with this. The judge is reaching out to the kid. You could, I don't want to open the nerd portal. I don't want to do it. I don't want to open the nerd portal. Is there a chance? I'm just can we just look at the nerd portal without it just all hell breaking loose? So it does have a kind of Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, join me vibe to it a little bit. Does that seem reasonable? I really like I hadn't thought about it exactly that way, but for some reason this offer, this monetary offer does seem like join me. We could rule the galaxy as father and son, right? It's very...
That you say that when you get to the point where he's in the cell and he's I could have taken you.
Oh, don't you know I'd loved you like a son? I'm not gonna share the meat. Don't want to share the meat.
Well, I just wonder, what would the judge get from that arrangement, besides having the pistol? And being pedophile, what is he gonna get?
Yeah. I like this. Besides being a pedophile,
Yeah.
et cetera, right? Besides being a pedophile, what would the judge get from this arrangement? Besides being a pedophile, what would Jeffrey Epstein...
Well, he said at the, I don't remember what part of the book, halfway through the book, that
Yeah.
his mission is to conquer everything.
Yes.
What's the one thing he hasn't conquered?
I like this. This is very good. Yeah, he hasn't conquered the kid. Right? Because the kid has reserved some corner of clemency in his heart. Right? So he's not opened his heart into the common lot. And there's some bit of rebellion in the kid. And the judge, not in his courtroom.
Can you remind us what the kids' tarot card reading was again?
Okay, so it's the Four of Cups. And, I mean, I'm skeptical of like kind of supernatural stuff to a certain degree. You can tell how skeptical I am by my ghost quarter story. One reading of the Four of Cups is that card can be associated with mercy, with clemency. Also, and this seems like very different, it's like some of this stuff is broad enough to encompass everything. Like that's kind of my gripe with like, oh, are you a Leo? Are you a... It's like, and then they name like personality traits, but those personality traits kind of fit everyone to a certain degree because they're very broad. Don't mean to offend any Zoomer astrologists, but so on the one hand, the Four of Cups is associated with mercy, clemency. On the other hand, it's associated with indifference. I think you see facets of both of those things with the kid, where the kid just wandering around, joining up with someone. Oh, I'll stay with this, weirdo in the desert in his little cave with this racist weirdo, and then I'll take up with a earless sociopath, and then I'll join up with Captain White's gang. He's just gonna... He seems to have, though he doesn't make the choice to kill the judge, he seems to have come into some kind of power. Like there's some kind of agency in him that doesn't seem to be there before. And it asserts itself once the old paradigm has broken down. Because Tobin runs with the kid basically for protection. Right, the kid is defending both of them, and it's Toadvine that is shading the kid's dominant eye with from the sun, right? Because he knows the kid's the better shot, and he even says, "Oh, he's a dead eye, isn't he?" By the way, just this is an aside. In this scene, Cormac has the kid drop the charging handle on the walker and put it into the dirt like a bipod. It doesn't work if you drop the charging handle, the cylinder locks up. Cormac should have known that. R.I.P. But yeah, the kid has some kind of power. The kid has some kind of...
Okay,
Yeah.
I actually do have something to say
Please.
now. I think everything you said, I feel like the scene when the kid is asking Tobin who the judge is the judge of, I feel like nobody else really asks that question except the kid. And I think you talking about him having some type of power, right? I think the kid's the only person, kind of the opposite of the judge, of pure curiosity and innocence. He's not innocent from the crimes, but more he's untainted and he has a genuine curiosity and he's indifferent to the murders of who he goes with. And I think that curiosity, that innocence is what conflicts with the judge, because he's kind of control. He wants to keep everything to himself. I had it's somewhere, I'm trying to figure it out, is that when I'm saying it, does it make sense?
That makes sense.
Oh, okay, because it does not make sense in my head.
It makes sense.
But,
I feel like I follow you.
okay, yeah, and so I feel like the kid was this power, not like a divine being, but he is this power, because you said it yourself, that the priest comes to him as a protection, right? Because I thought it was Tobin protecting Tobin protecting the kid.
That's what it's felt like before that moment.
But then when you said it that way, it's I see it now. I see how the kid is almost the protection from the judge.
He's the muscle.
Yeah.
In this context, right? He's the muscle. And he is in this situation, the judge is trying to dictate terms, trying to pronounce judgment, but the kid holds the high card, right? He holds the high ground, he holds the weapon.
And I Toadvine kind of switches. Like, relationship with the kid and Tobin switches, but also the dynamic with the kid and Toadvine. There's a shift here. Because I always felt like they were always, like, close. Like, always in the narration, they're next to one another, they're experiencing the same events at the same time. And then the kid says to him, it's not country you run out of.
So
And Toadvine
interesting.
decides not to come with him.
Yeah, I don't think I've caught on that line before I was reading it aloud to you guys, and all the times I've read this book, all the times I've taught this book, that the kid breaks with Toadvine there. I mean, if it's not country you've run out of, it's our fellowship, our friendship. I mean, they are weirdly friends. You know, bros that knife fight together stay together.
He's also hinting, or, well, not hinting, blatantly telling Toadvine that he's let himself be conquered by the judge. Toadvine at this point has quite literally aligned himself with the judge's way of thinking. He's like, it's not country that you've run out of. It's, as of this point, all they've been doing with Blanton's gang is they've had the freedom of wandering. So it's not the fact that he's just run out of country to just roam and be free with. It's he's constricted himself to this ideology that war is everything. You can't leave it anymore.
I don't know what happened this weekend. Y'all just went home Thursday and started swallowing smart pills and just started like it's just fire from you guys today. It's great stuff. So let me, you know, you guys we're really cooking. Let me dumb it down a little bit. So this weekend they found Tupac's killer, and I was thinking about Tupac's killer, and I was thinking that this guy was charged with murder because he was in the same car as the dudes that did the drive-by. Like, he's not even charged with shooting Tupac, right? And I was like, wait, you can be charged with murder just being in a car? And they're like, yeah, you know, you can be like, you know, people in a car and they're blasting and you sit there. I'm like, what are you supposed to do? Like, maybe you like go to Sonic and your friends just start blasting. I mean, it's happened to many of us, right? I mean, like, what? I'm not a murderer. I'm eating a blizzard. And then, like, what am I supposed to, sir?
I thought he got arrested because he was like on like podcasts, like flexing.
Well, that's how he got caught. But he's charged, right? He's not charged with a podcast. He's charged with being in the car, right? Yeah, but not smart, right? To be like, oh, you know, let me go on a podcast. And yeah, I was in that car. Well, dude.
Like, on the podcast, he's like, I saw how his body was moving.
Dude.
He got shot and stuff.
He wrote a book.
He wrote a book.
He wrote a book about it. I mean, yeah. So, the kid travels, I mean, he's with this drive-by across the Southwest, right? We don't see him participate in the massacres, right? The slaughter of the Helenos, like, all this horrible stuff happens, and when it's all over, the kid's walking out of the lake. Well, what is he doing, right? He seems to disappear every time there's a massacre, and the judge is going to start bringing his charges. So I want to look at the reading of the indictment. Page 304. So Tobin and the kid are hiding out, trying to get away. The kid thinks that he's lost the judge. Bottom of 304. When he came to the creek, he drank and bathed his leg and lay listening as before. "Throw that gun out now," said the judge. He froze. The voice was not 50 feet away. That's where you are. You're about 50 feet, right? "I know what you've done. The priest put you up to it, and I'll take that as a mitigation in the act and the intent, which I would any man in his wrongdoing. But there's the question of property. You bring me that pistol now." So the kid's just like lying there, heart hammering away like a critter. They make it out of this situation. I like that they're telling each other to like cover your ears. Don't listen to what the judge is saying. Like as if like just the sound of his voice is viral. It can create a virus. It can travel. It can corrupt and degrade. So they get away, and then page 311. Oh, I'm sorry, let's back up to 309. The kid and Tobin, they kind of argue about all this. The kid spoke to him, Tobin, he ain't nothing. You told me so yourself. Men are made of the dust of the earth. You said it was no parable. No parable. That it was a naked fact and the judge was a man like all men. Face him down then, said the ex-priest. Face him down if he is so. And him with a rifle and me with a pistol. Him with 2 rifles. Get up from there. So the kid is kind of more toward, no, the judge is a man like any other man. Tobin, who in the previous chapter, Duim, had counseled the kid to kill the judge, is now like, okay, if this guy's real, if this guy's killable, why can't you kill him? Why won't you pull the trigger? Right? Like, I think this goes back to like, stop up your ears. The judge is, infecting us. The kid saying of the judge, he ain't nothing. It's a very interesting double negative, right? If you tell someone they're nothing, that they're no thing, that in itself is an interesting thing to say. If you say, by saying he ain't nothing, I mean, it's kind of a southern way of saying he's nothing to worry about. But of course, Cormac doesn't put those words in his mouth for no reason. He ain't nothing indicates that like he's just nothing. Later on, the kid will say those words to the judge, and the judge will say, you speak truer than you know. I'm not a thing. Right? And this gets into the whole idea of, it's almost an Eastern idea of nothing and nothingness, no thingness, right? Not as an emptiness or a lack, but we'll get to that. So again, the kid gets another opportunity potentially to kill the judge. In the bottom of 311, the judge continues to read out the indictment. The priest has led you to this boy. I know you would not hide. I know too you've not the heart of a common assassin. I've passed before your gun sights twice this hour and will pass a 3rd time. Why not show yourself? No assassin and no partisan either. There's a flawed place in the fabric of your heart. Do you think I could not know? You alone were mutinous. You alone reserved in your soul some corner of clemency for the heathen. Do you think I've killed Brown and Toadvine? They are alive as you and me. They are alive and in possession of the fruits of their election. Do you understand? Ask the priest. The priest knows. The priest does not lie. Perhaps you've seen this place in a dream, that you would die here. And then the judge drifts away. They're able to get away for now. What's this whole thing about? We've touched on a little bit this, like, there's a flawed place in the fabric of your heart, the fabric of your soul. You alone were mutinous. You reserved some corner of clemency, mercy for the heathen. The heathen has to be like the Apache, right, that they've been hunting. That's got to be who he's referring to. What's the judge talking about? This is a weird indictment.
Like, he's accusing the kid of never being fully loyal to the gang.
And not joining in the murder and the slaughter that we were just referring to, right? That he does, that the gang does this kind of murder, slaughter, the kid kind of disappears. Now the judge is saying, you didn't empty out your heart to the common lot. Sir?
I think it's, again, part of the idea of the judge wanting some kind of like servitude from the kid. he's saying that the kid had clemency for the heathen. Well, who decides that they're heathen? The judge.
Correct.
He's saying that you rejected
Yeah.
my verdict. So
Correct.
you're at fault.
Yeah, certainly the Apache didn't think of themselves as heathen. Oh, what do? Well, we hunt from horseback, we raid, and of course we're heathen, right? No one thinks of themselves as heathen. That's a judgment from someone else. Elizabeth?
I think the judge maybe sees the kid as kind of the antithesis of the point he was making earlier about war. Like he said that, young men love it and old men love it in them.
Hmm?
But we see with the kid, he's never around when there's fighting and he's never participating in it. So it's almost like the kid's existence is in opposition to everything the judge is believing.
The kid's existence is an opposition to everything the judge believes. Did you have something?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just reads like the judge wants to be the only person that really makes the decision on who lives and who dies.
Mhm.
And then everybody beneath him, so to speak, just lusts for like bloodshed.
Mhm.
And that's the way he likes it. But the kid is in a way on the same level as the judge, where he doesn't just kill mercilessly all the time, like he will kill, but he also makes an active decision in who lives and who dies.
Right.
And I feel like that might be why the judge felt really cocky when he had the gun to his head both times.
Mm-hmm.
Because either way, he would have won in a sense if the kid shot him, because he would have killed him unjustly in a way.
Interesting. I mean, again, I don't want to open the nerd portal. Let's just peek. Let's peek around the corner at the portal. I mean, in Nolan's The Dark Knight, Joker wants Batman to kill him. That's what he wants. Batman has a rule. He doesn't kill. He'll do all these other things. He'll beat people to a pulp and he'll et cetera, but he won't kill, right? And the Joker wants him to do it. He even says it. Hit me. I want you to do it. You're like me. And the judge, it's back to what you're saying. The judge wants the kid to join him. Join me.
So, do you remember how at the very beginning of the reading you said that at some point in the book we're going to receive like a shift? So, I don't know, I kind of just thought about this. The gang themselves also had that shift.
Mm-hmm.
So as we followed the gang, they started off with rock, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They started off bad. Of course, you can't.
Right.
But as they witnessed the judge do more and more brutal things and say stuff that kind of already spoke to them,
Mm-hmm.
they start from going, I don't like that you just killed an infant, right? Whatever. But at the very end, we witnessed the doctor and a girl abused, chained.
Mm-hmm.
They enslaved people.
Mm-hmm.
That's stuff that at the beginning of the book they wouldn't have done. So steadily, the judge tainted them.
And he degrades them further.
Yeah, and I think that Cormac making the kid disappear from every single... we've never seen the kid commit an atrocity,
No.
At least from what I remember.
No.
We haven't seen him do that.
Most of what he does is in self-defense. The
Yeah.
worst thing that he does is when he gets into the fight with the barkeeper at the tavern in San Antonio.
Yeah.
He stabs him in the eye. Now, I don't think he kills him. It's not ideal to have the jagged neck of a bottleneck. It's not ideal, but you wouldn't necessarily die of it. You might die of it, but the kid's in a fight. There's a sense of the kid as a brawler, not as like a mass murderer.
Mm-hmm. And even then, it was only because the barkeep was the worst kind of person imaginable.
He doesn't do things for no reason, the kid. He doesn't just start,
Mm-hmm.
right? He doesn't just start shit. He usually he gets into it with Toadvine, kicks him in the throat, right?
It's interesting that the judge degrades the gang, even when they think they're kind of in resistance to him. Because every time they're talking at the campfire, they're like, "Oh, you're crazy, Holden. We don't believe this." And yet, they're descending to his level the whole time.
Black Jackson does as well. Because he starts wearing that cloth, he becomes like a priest just as the judge is.
Yeah, he becomes the tarot card,
Yeah.
right? Wheelless on a dark river. The wagon inverted and used as a ferry. Like everything that the fortune teller says, it comes true.
This might open another portal. This reminds me of, you mentioned Red Dead Redemption.
Okay.
Like it's very inspired by this, and this made me think of a scene where in the story, the gang leader, his name is Dutch, and they pick up a guy named Micah, who I basically see as the judge. Because the gang was all fine before Micah came. When Micah came, like things started going south. The leader started being more rash, more hasty, and this made me think of Glanton and Judge relationship, where I think at first it may have been like Judge was on a leash kind of ordeal, because I think Glenn liked him because he got things done, and I think that we all like notice he's very resourceful. He knows things. He gets them out of a pinch. But I think the catalyst. I mean, it was when Glanton dies, right? His authority over Judge is gone, and I think everyone who survives is afraid of the judge because there's not someone there to control his impulse, to control his spewing. Not that the judge needed to be controlled, but it's kind of like Glanton was this like higher authority over him. Right?
Yeah, I like that a lot. The gang is kind of like a cult. And the farther away you drift from society and drift into a tightly knit band of people, especially if you have the influences of a Glanton and the influences of a Judge Holden, then I think if you were a member of this gang, a lot of what you did, as horrific as it is, would begin to make a weird sense. Like you would get into that mindset. You would become that, right? But there are moments where the judge's depravity is so over the top that they're shocked out of this. The scene with the Apache boy, I mean, I'm not going to go into all these things the judge does that the members of the gang, except for Glanton, they're shocked out of, like this is a deeper level. Like you're leading us into even a larger abyss. The judge does broker the deal to acquire the ferry. And at first it's a business deal, and then the doctor just disappears one day and no one sees him again. It's like, okay. And they're just like robbing people outright. Elizabeth? Nope. So, an interesting sentence follows the section break there on 312. They would have died if the Indians had not found them. Once again, in this book, right? The kid is rescued by people of color, right? First, he's rescued by a woman, then he's rescued by the multi-ethnic cowboys, or black cowboys, Mexican cowboys, Native American cowboys, and then, again, kids rescued by the natives. Right? It's pretty interesting that a week before, or however long before, not long before, they were hunting these people. Glanton's gang, if they had ridden into this village, would have slaughtered these people. But we're under a different kind of, you guys keep saying the word, it's the right word, authority. A different kind of authority rules, different protocol have presented themselves. There's also a weird shift that I've noticed in this class. Like, I've done this I've taught this book over 20 years now, and I know the expression. I've seen the expression so many times. The first few class periods, that shocked expression where you guys look like you've seen a car wreck, and then that car wreck catches on fire, and then that car wreck gets bombed, and then a sinkhole collapses into the earth, right? And there's just this look on the student's face like, oh my gosh, what is this book you're making us read? And then something shifts with Tobin's story about the judge's gunpowder, because the judge is so interesting and curious, and right? And then at this point, the kid kind of comes on in some way. We begin to root for him in a way that it's hard to, or harder to in the past. You start wanting him to, quote, make it. I don't know what it is, but I feel sympathetic to the kid in a way that I don't at the very beginning. I'm more just watching what this lost boy will do. But you now think he begins to feel more and more like a protagonist. And the more he opposes the judge, the more like a protagonist he feels, right? And the more the judge seems to be a being who wants to swallow his soul, who wants to consume him. Yes?
I will say part of it is from having read No Country for Old Men before reading this one, I'm very much aware of how, like, McCarthy has no qualms about killing the protagonist who you
Right.
follow through the book.
Right.
And so at this point, like, I'm starting to see, like, the differences from the kid and everything that he's been through.
Right.
But I'm also hoping that he is alive at the end of the book.
Yeah, you want him to make it. You want him to make it. And it's weird to imagine a future for the kid. Now, in the first, if you go to the archives, Texas State, which is at San Marcos, this is like in 2007, they acquired all of McCarthy's papers. He was still alive. He didn't die till this year, McCarthy. They acquired all of his papers, and they paid a few $1 million. And that's like all the drafts of his books, his notes, they're just boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes. So if you go to the archive, the initial draft of Blood Meridian, now this doesn't exist, McCarthy took this out, but the kid is carrying a letter with him. And the kid's illiterate, right? He can't read. He can neither read nor write, and in him already broods a taste for mindless violence. So the kid will, toward the end of the book, in the first draft, he'll walk up and hand people this letter, they'll read it, and then they'll just back away. And all he wants is for people to tell him, he wants to connect with people, and he wants them to tell him what's written in this letter, right? And that draft doesn't tell you what this letter is. It says it's 8 words, right? And you're like, what 8 words, right? So on the manuscript page, in one of the drafts, in pencil, very faint pencil, in Cormac's hand, is the note in the margin, 8 words, "The bearer of this letter will kill you." Now, that's pretty cute, but it's too clever, and Cormac took it out. It's the right move. It doesn't belong. But my intention in bringing that up is to indicate Cormac is thinking of the kid as someone who, at this point in his life, after having gone through this experience, begins to seek some kind of redemption. What could redemption look like for the kid, right? And still hanging out there, the judge is still circling, right? Like the shark in Jaws, he's still circling. And we still haven't found out exactly what he's a judge of. And next time we will.